I actually have a very controversial opinion. There is an assumption that the ERG program is an extension of the DEI team, where that is not always the case. And even when it should be approached very cautiously, sometimes I think that as a DEI leader, because of the work that you may do in your day job, you lose sight of the fact that an ERG has to be about the community, about the people. And thank you so much for having me. My name's Maceo, and I love ERGs so much that I literally go by the ERG homegirl here on LinkedIn, as you can see. But I've been an ERG leader, ERG program manager, still actually now program managing multiple companies' programs, and just really passionate about giving ERG leaders and program managers good, relevant information.
In the work that you do you often see that ERG leaders and D&I leaders are misaligned?
Definitely. I think what I hear a lot is that ERG leaders feel like they were just kind of thrown into the fire just to do the work without any real instruction on what the work means. Actually, I hear that a lot from ERG leaders, but to be fair, especially if you're a DEI leader, you're juggling multiple things. So oftentimes you don't have the resources yourself or the time even to really support them. So that's something that I see a lot in the space, and that causes a lot of tensions, because it's like, I'm trying to help you, even though as a DEI leader, a lot of times ERGs is not the strength of a lot of DEI leaders. And then that also adds a further pain point with lacking trust between the DI leader / probably the program manager, and the ERG leaders themselves.
Why do you think there's such a lack of scope when it comes to the ERG leader roles that exist?
I actually have a very controversial opinion on this, but it's something that I think just needs to be spoken to more. Really, I think there's a couple of things with that. I think when ERGs are formed, most of the time, whoever's like leading the charge in forming these ERGs doesn't usually take the time to really understand what the purpose of the program is, which should be the first thing, is really getting alignment with why this program exists. And a lot of the time, because it is led specifically by the DEI team, there is an assumption that the ERG program is an extension of the DEI team, where that is not always the case. And even when that is the case, it should be approached very cautiously. But unfortunately, because the DEI team just kind of stands up the program, they say, it can't be that hard. We'll just get some volunteers to do some programming. There's a huge misalignment. And oftentimes, ERG leaders will go charging at something that they want to bring to life, and that's not what the business wants to bring to life. It might be something that the DEI team supports and wants to do in the future, so they're kind of using the ERGs as like a tester to see if these initiatives can come to life. But oftentimes, you're almost like sacrificing the ERG chairs, these volunteers, to bring your initiatives as a DEI leader to life, which that's something that I'm seeing more and more that's very problematic. And also, even then, that brings in the portion of what a successful ERG program is, and assuming that it has to have business return on investment the same way that a DEI team needs return on investment. It's just very problematic. And sometimes I think that as a DEI leader, because of the work that you may do in your day job, you lose sight of the fact that an ERG has to be about the community, about the people within it, and making for a better experience for these niche communities.
Do you think we're asking too much of our ERG chairs? And should more of the responsibility be on the DE&I team?
I agree partially, because there is still a lack of accountability that does happen with a lot of ERG chairs. And for me, when I say chairs, I know we're using it interchangeably. Just ERG leaders in general is what I'm saying. But with that, it's for those of you who don't know me, you're probably not familiar with the 3 Ps of ERGs that I talk about a lot. I've been talking about it a lot lately, especially. But even with that, to speed run through it, there's an order in which an ERG should be instituted, and most companies did not follow that order. And this directly mirrors how it is in the business world. Everything I do around ERGs is based on business development, but just applied to ERGs. But even with those 3 Ps, it's You're supposed to understand what's the purpose of this program. That's something that should be on the DI leaders. And I'm also using DEI leaders interchangeably with whoever's over the ERG program. So if it is HR, but like that's something where it shouldn't be on the ERGs to figure out what's their vision. Like as a program, like whoever runs the program should have a vision for the program. Same thing when it comes to like what does this program success look like? Again, that should come from whoever's running the program. And then like I'm speeding through a lot of it, but purpose is the second, not purpose, process is the second P, where that's really saying for all of the chairs, like what are the roles for the chairs that exist and how should they do their role? Like what are the SOPs for each role? Like breaking it down step by step so a new person could come in and do it. And it's actually sad how many companies don't have this at all. They have a very rough job description like overview of what the chair is supposed to do, and they just leave it to the chair to say, hey, figure the rest of it out, which is like wild to me, that is existing at like 95% of the people that I speak to, maybe even more. And then it's programming. Then it's about what are the things that the chairs are supposed to do and the events and things like that. But that comes last. However, for most companies, that came first, where we're just putting all the pressure on the chairs, and then we're throwing it in as like a side mission. Oh, by the way, figure out what your ERG program's about, or what your ERG's about, and how to do it right. And that's very sad to me that we're putting it on volunteer leaders to figure out a whole program management, essentially, for their ERGs.
I use all of your resources at my company, but I want to know the difference between an ERG chair and an ERG program manager, made very simple.
Yeah, I will say this is something that I toiled with for months. Like, what is the purpose of this chair role? Just because it's one of those things that's been historically part of ERGs. And when I'm saying chair in this context, just for those listening, we're talking about like if your ERG is structured where you have a chair as like the top person, and then you have different committee leads or leads for specific activities below that. But with that, what I've come to is that the chair is really the project manager of the ERG. And even if you had multiple ERGs, it would be the same thing, but they're the person who's making sure that all of those individual, like the communications leads, the member engagement lead, like that they're doing their role without you having to be hands-on. So ideally, they are just like, they would escalate things to you as needed. But the idea is that you as a DIB leader, like you can continue to do your day job and focus really on that without having to be so hands-on, because the chair understands what everyone's supposed to be doing and can really hold everyone accountable to those things. So having that monthly or even bi-weekly, I see, meeting with their leadership team, and really even if they have like a checklist to make sure, hey, have you all done these things this month? What do you all need support with? How can I be a support to you? I being the chair. So even if like someone's out of office for the week, like that's where the chair would step in. But they're although project manager sounds like they're over the ERG, which they are technically, they're also under in that they're really supporting all of the leads to make sure that things are flowing. And they're like the glue that brings everyone together. And after implementing that over these past like 6 months, I've seen a huge change in the amount of time spent for the program manager to not have to be so hands-on.
We're in the early adolescence phase of our development. Would you recommend I outline responsibilities for the remaining phases?
I think the outline's okay, but because those other phases are so like far out, technically the mid one's not that far out, but it's so far out, I would honestly just do like a project plan in terms of right now we expect to be in this phase, this early adolescence phase for the next 6 months. That being said, here's the things that you should accomplish while we're in this phase, and giving them those to do. So whether it's like theme your months for this first 6 months, and make sure that get feedback from the leaders to make sure that all the processes that we have in place are good. Something that holds them accountable to like, how are you making this program better? But also that helps to meet a goal of this is how we'll know that we're ready for the next phase of development.
What advice do you have for ERG leaders that don't feel like they have their manager's support and buy-in for their participation?
I have so much to say for everything ERG. So sorry. I'm always like working in my bubble, so very rarely do I get to nerd out about ERGs. Speaking as a former support employee who was an ERG leader, so I get how it is when it's like your manager, for multiple different reasons, may not support it. For me, thing one was my executive sponsor. Like, really leveraging them was the game changer. Like, truly, if an executive says to do something, that changes it for your manager. So whether they say it like at the next team meeting where they say, hey, we support, employees at this level going to ERGs. As a matter of fact, maybe it's like we run a competition, which mid-level manager can have the highest percentage of their members, like their teammates, participate in ERGs or something like that. But really leveraging the executive sponsor is huge. Thing two, honestly, it is a fight, if we're being honest, because if your manager really doesn't want you to attend, there's probably other underlying reasons. It could even be honestly, just jealousy of the exposure that you get as an ERG leader that they don't have, which I've seen often. Even personally, I've seen it many times. So that being said, I just tell them just to be consistent, find other ways to get involved. Even if it's not an event, you still can put your name out there by being active in the whatever communications channel you all use as an ERG, but just by being active when there is an opportunity, like maybe to speak on the company all hands or whatever it may be, like raise your hand for the things that you can do and don't double down on the opportunities that you might miss, because there's so many ways to get involved in an ERG outside of just those live things.
In your opinion, what are some things that are wrongfully being delegated to ERG leaders, and how can ERG leaders respectfully push back?
Yes, a couple of things with that. In terms of thing one, I would say metric goals should be something that whoever's leading the ERG, so DI lead or whomever, should be responsible for. Even like building a dashboard. Like, why most ERG programs don't have data and metrics is like another wild thing to me. But that is on whoever's leading the program to do. And even, I know it was mentioned a lot overseas where you all are at, or even over here, a lot of the ERG programs are grassroots, but the responsibility of fixing that also is not on the ERG leaders. It's on whoever's over the program to go back and fix what's broken, essentially. So like those are some of the top ones that I see. Even then, another controversial opinion, I'm full of them, is that a lot of the things that the DEI team does that they pass on to ERG leaders aren't even qualified to do. Like, to make business decisions that are diversity based, that actually affect who the business serves, like the customers. ERG leaders, they can inform it as a focus group, but they should not be the final say on anything like that. Like, marketing wise, ERGs can support, but they're not professional marketers, so they're always going to say the most extreme thing. Like, if someone came to me and asked, for Black History Month, what should we do? And they're a conservative company, I'm always going to say the most extreme thing, because it's let's go all out, because I care, like most ERG leaders do, they care. But having the final say and going all out could be a very, very harmful thing to the business, and it's something that we've seen with a lot of businesses last year even. So even with that, I'd say putting the pressure on the ERGs to make these decisions, again, being a stakeholder, like someone to inform, give their feedback on, that's cool, but that final say should also lean on DEI leaders, because you're the professional who's getting paid and who has the knowledge and the context. So yeah, anyway, I can rant on that too.
Do you believe that if ERG leaders held more senior roles in their organization, that ERGs will be better set up for success?
It can be kind of problematic, because people who might not appear to have the skills based on where they are in the organization, it doesn't mean that they don't have the skills. It just means that the DEI leader didn't do the work to make it that easy for them. Like, for me, again, I was a support agent very bottom of the organization when I became an ERG leader, and I led a huge ERG at a huge company with a huge budget, not because of any skills that my resume had, but all that to say, one of the things I really like to say is that ERGs, they should almost be like franchises, where when you think about it, McDonald's, like, they handle hot stuff at McDonald's, like, that can actually hurt people, and yet teenagers can come in and they can do the work because McDonald's has made it that easy so that you can't mess it up. ERGs can be like that, where we can put frameworks in place where it's so easy that anyone can do it, but that takes a level of work and spelling it out on like how to actually do this, and also a level of understanding for the DEI leader themselves to understand what does it mean to do this role. And I think that that's like where the ERG space needs a lot of work with the DEI leaders actually familiarizing themselves with what is needed so that they can give best practices. That conversation deserves an encore, and now I'm going to give it to you. So the conversation is around the relationship between DEI leaders and ERG leaders, something I feel passionate about, and this is something I haven't really talked about. So let's call this segment like Coffee Chats with Maceo, right? With the conversation with ERG leaders and DEI leaders, honestly, like, I know that this is a hard conversation to take in, so I say it with love. But I think it's time DEI leaders admit the truth. Dramatic, dark lighting. I think it's time DEI leaders admit the truth in that a DEI expert and an ERG expert is not an interchangeable term by any means. Honestly, that's why I'm the ERG homegirl, because I'm ERGs, which is really, more than anything, it's like business development with a community lens with a hint of ERG, but in the corporate context. That's like more so what that means. But I'm not a DEI expert. You didn't go into your role expecting to be an ERG expert, chances are. So I don't blame you. You were kind of forced into helping to support the ERGs, and you're like, I'll just do my best. And hats off to you. I respect that. But I also think it's like, no wonder it's such a bad relationship, though, because ERG leaders can see through that in ways that you might not be willing to admit, in ways that your boss might be hoping that is not true. But if you're not an expert and you're leading a group of people, that's very, very tough. If you're not positioning yourself as someone worth following. Ooh, maybe we need a conversation on that. Like, how to be someone worth following when you're not an expert. How do you lead someone? I don't know what's going on with my camera. How do you lead someone down that journey? I think that that's where the conversation needs to happen to really help to strengthen the relationships. Now, in some cases, there are some caveats on why there might be a rough relationship between the DEI person and the ERG leaders. So, for instance, like a company I was speaking to, they were having the hardest time with their ERG leaders. Two in particular were very disrespectful, very possessive. They didn't want to see any changes. They wanted to do things their own way. They wanted to go over the DEI manager to their executive sponsors, and it's just like this whole back and forth where it's a possessiveness thing around the idea of we know what's best for our community, which again goes back to trust and being a reliable person worth following and saying, hey, look, I'm actually an expert at this. I get paid for it for a reason, and what I'm telling you is going to work, and I have the metrics to support it. That's kind of what it's all about. But being that I just kind of struck a nerve with myself with the thought of like how to be someone worth following, I think that that's something really worth looking into. So expect more context, more information, and my learnings on that in the near future. Anyway, you all got to hear a little bit of my thoughts and my hot takes. You know that I'm full of them. You got to see my first episode on this new camera, which I clearly don't know how to work yet, but bear with me. We're getting there and we are growing. More to come. It's Maceo, in case you didn't know, aka the ERG Homegirl, and I'm signing off.